Ladies and gentlemen, this is something hugely worrying. An 8-year-old girl has collapsed at a school in Ahmedabad. Doctors have said it's due to cardiac arrest. My colleague Hiten has reached out to the family, who has confirmed that the child had no known medical history. She was living with her grandparents. But just look at the CCTV footage, ladies and gentlemen. The child, we are withholding the child's name or a photograph. In fact, she's seen walking in the CCTV footage, and then she stops, waits. She then walks and sits on a seat next to her. Small kids passing by, realizing something is not right, and within seconds, she shockingly collapses. School has claimed she has rushed to the hospital but couldn't be saved. Our heart goes out to the family. Big concerns at this point, but first let's listen into what the principal has said.
जी, आज सुबह बच्ची जैसे नॉर्मल दूसरे दिनों में आती है वैसे ही आई थी, लेकिन जब वो फर्स्ट फ्लोर पे अपने क्लास पे गई तो क्लास में जाने से पहले हमने देखा कि कॉरिडोर में, जो रिकॉर्डिंग में हमने देखा कि कॉरिडोर में वो धीरे धीरे चल रही थी, जा रही थी, एंड अल्टीमेटली कुछ अनइजीनेस दिख रहा था। फिर पास में जो चेयर था उसमें जाकर वो बैठ गई। चेयर से धीरे धीरे वो स्लाइड करने लगी, तो जैसे टीचर्स ने देखा इमीडिएटली उसको जाकर सहारा दिया, उसको लिटाया एंड उसको कंफर्टेबल फील करवाया। देखकर लगा कि उसको थोड़ी ब्रीदिंग प्रॉब्लम हो रही थी, जिस वजह से उसको सीपीआर दिया गया एंड अल्टीमेटली हमने इमीडिएटली 108 को फ़ोन किया ताकि उसको हॉस्पिटल लेकर जाया जा सके। बट 108 के लिए फिर हमने सोचा कि वेट करना मुनासिब नहीं होगा, इसी वजह से हम लोग अपने ही स्कूल के एक स्टाफ की गाड़ी में उसको लेकर जायडस में लेकर गए और वहां पर हमने एडमिट करवाया इमरजेंसी में। उसको डॉक्टर्स ने जैसे देखा, कहा कि इसको कार्डियक अरेस्ट आया है। आफ्टर इंस्पेक्शन दे सेड कि उसको कार्डियक अरेस्ट आया है एंड उसको वेंटिलेटर पे रखना पड़ेगा एंड उसको वेंटिलेटर में रखा गया। उसको रिवाइव करने की कोशिश की बट अल्टीमेटली उसकी डेथ हो गई।
Ladies and gentlemen, it's also important to put this in perspective. It isn't the first such instance of young children collapsing. Another 8-year-old student from Chamrajnagar, located 160 kilometers from Bengaluru, collapsed and died from cardiac arrest, according to officials. The child was with her classmates when she suddenly fell dizzy and lost her balance. The school has said they rushed her to the hospital, but efforts to revive her were unsuccessful. There have been similar cases reported from Rajasthan, Tamil Nadu last year as well. Well, for all these cases, we may not know their medical history whatsoever, but Hiten joins me right now. My colleague Hiten joins me at this point. Hiten, very disturbing details emerging at this point. My first question to you, Hiten, did you speak to the family? Could you confirm that this child did not have any known medical ailments or history of that sort?
यस, देखिए हमने बातचीत की उनके फैमिली मेंबर्स से। मैंने फादर को कांटेक्ट कर दी थी, कोशिश की थी। हालांकि उनकी 8 साल की बच्ची की डेथ हुई है, हार्ट अटैक से डेथ हुई है। ज्यादा कुछ वो कह नहीं पाए, बात नहीं कर पाए, लेकिन उन्होंने इतना कंफर्म किया कि उसे किसी भी प्रकार की कोई सीरियस बीमारी भी नहीं थी या फिर उसकी कोई मेडिकल हिस्ट्री तक भी नहीं थी, क्योंकि 8 साल की थी, फिजिकली फिट थी पूरी तरह से। जब बच्चों का एडमिशन स्कूल में किया जाता है तो स्कूल की तरफ से भी एक फिजिकल सर्टिफिकेट लिया जाता है। तो फिजिकल सर्टिफिकेट ये दिया गया था कि वो फिजिकली पूरी तरह फिट है, किसी भी प्रकार की कोई मेडिकल हिस्ट्री उसे नहीं है। उसके बाद ही स्कूल की तरफ से एडमिशन दिया गया था। लेकिन आज जब सडनली मॉर्निंग अराउंड 7:30 बच्ची स्कूल में पहुंचती है और 8 बजे के करीब ये इंसिडेंट जो वो होता है कि हार्ट अटैक से उसकी डेथ होती है। लेकिन एक कंसर्न का मामला है सिर्फ गुजरात और अहमदाबाद के लिए ही नहीं बल्कि देश भर में, क्योंकि इसके बाद जब पेरेंट्स से बात हुई, उसके बाद जब मैंने अहमदाबाद सिविल हॉस्पिटल के सुपरिटेंडेंट से जब बात की तो उनके साथ जो टेलीफोनिक कन्वर्सेशन हुआ, उन्होंने मुझे सीधे तौर पर ये कहा कि बच्चों में हार्ट अटैक इसलिए ये देखने मिल रहा है 8 साल की बच्ची को हार्ट अटैक इसलिए हुआ हो सकता है कि आजकल बच्चे जंक फूड का इस्तेमाल बहुत करते हैं, जंक फूड खाते बहुत है। अब
जी,
पहले
आई
हेल्दी फूड
अंडरस्टैंड
दिया
हितेन।
जाता
आई
था,
थिंक
लेकिन
बिग कंसर्न्स आप जो कहना चाह रहे हैं, आपको जो डॉक्टर ने कहा वो बहुत जरूरी है और हम वो डिस्कस भी करेंगे हितेन एक्सपर्ट्स के साथ। बट थैंक यू वेरी मच फॉर जॉइनिंग अस, फॉर गिविंग अस दिस डिटेल्स। हितेन कंफर्मिंग दैट द फैमिली हैज सेड दिस चाइल्ड डिड नॉट हैव any history of medical ailments as such. Thank you, Hitain, for joining us. I'm being joined at this point by Dr. Professor N.N. Khanna, who is a senior cardiologist and advisor to Apollo Group of Hospitals, Dr. Sanjeev Bagai, who is a pediatrician, as well as Dr. Shikha Sharma, who's a senior nutritionist. Thank you very much, all of you, for joining me. Dr. N.N. Khanna, first to you. How do you look at this? I mean, when all of us at the newsroom saw the visuals that emerged of this child, I mean, look at her. She's walking. She stops because she realized something is off. She herself must not have known because she doesn't have any history. That's what the family claims. So she didn't reach out to anybody. Then she walks a little bit, sits in the seat nearby because she realizes that she can't move forward. And there are young children walking past her, and they stop by to realizing that something is off with her. And by then she collapses. Mr. N.N. Khanna, firstly, just tell us how rare is this, or is there something more to this?
Yeah, I mean, it is so disturbing to see this. But, as doctors and as cardiologists, we do know that these things can happen because of some congenital channelopathies and some, there's an electrical short circuiting in the heart, and this can lead to sudden death. So, this is not a case of heart attack, but it's a case of cardiac arrest, which sometimes can happen because of genetic tendencies and genetic channelopathies. When I say genetic, it doesn't mean that the parents or the siblings had to have it, but the gene is transferred, and it's if it finds a trigger, it can actually lead to this. And the triggers could be somebody suggested food. Yes, it could be food, but it could be something else as well. It could be extreme stress, emotional or physical, or electrolyte imbalance. And sometimes per se, if people have channelopathies and genetic tendencies for certain cardiac arrest, it can happen.
If that is how this is supposed to be, see, let me just get in Dr. Sanjeev Bagai. Dr. Sanjeev Bagai, over the last few months, over the last 1 year, we've reported several instances of cardiac arrest among young people. And then we've had several reasons, several factors that would weigh in. Now, while we, of course, don't know is there a connect between the two, and I do not want to get to that at this point, what I do want to ask, is there a concern around what we are seeing among young children who have possibly not even hit their teens, but even among early teens for that matter? Is there a concern, or is this just about how it happens?
Good evening. Extremely disturbing and unfortunate. A loss of any child's life is very hurtful for the parents and the entire medical fraternity. But coming to your question directly is three quick parts. One is heart issues or cardiac problems are well known to exist. Very often, we even as pediatricians or as family physicians tend to overlook these kind of issues. Congenital structural abnormalities. Sometimes newborns are born with it after infections, especially post-streptococcal infections, which involve the valves, or COVID. COVID has increased the magnitude of cardiac disease twofold in children. Sufficient published data on this. Myocarditis, pericarditis, substance abuse, obesity in children, it's almost 15 to 20% incidence. Hypertension, 2 to 5% incidence in the pediatric age group. Cardiomyopathy, electrolyte disturbances, high lipids in the blood, and dietary factors. But more importantly, is almost 66% of children, this is again published data, have no past recorded history. And more importantly, 49% of them have some sort of inherited disease. So the carry home message really is, as a learning lesson from this is, schools must have an authentic health unit, not just with an MBBS doctor, but with a full-time pediatrician during working hours. Point number two, especially schools who house
Dr.
thousands
Sanjeev
of
Bagay,
children.
Dr. Sanjeev
Yes.
Bagay, allow me to just interrupt you. Allow me to just interrupt you briefly. I'm being joined by Sharmishtha Sinha. Thank you very much, ma'am. Sharmishtha Sinha is the principal of the school where this unfortunate incident has happened.
Yeah.
Do we
Good
have
evening, all of
Sharmishtha
you.
Sinha with us?
Yes, I am there, and it's really a
All right,
very
good evening, ma'am.
unfortunate incident that has happened. Good evening, good evening.
Okay,
You wish God
ma'am,
healing for
I
those
think
people.
we'll not be able to speak to you because there seems to be some technical issue. We'll get to you.
Yeah.
Uh, Dr. Sanjeev Bagay, if I can come to you again. Dr. Sanjeev Bagay, apologies for that. So you were talking about how COVID, you spoke about several instances and you also spoke about COVID pandemic and the impact. I want to stick on that for a little bit more. And I'm asking you this reason because first thing that many people ask, and it is important to ask you as well as Mr. Khanna who joins us, this whole aspect. Many people seem to suggest that these instances, one, are obviously increasing after the cardiac arrests, after the COVID pandemic, and if it is after the COVID pandemic, does it have any link to the vaccines that have been taken? Important to ask doctors, and that's why I'm asking this.
Yeah, so very quickly, I think the school infrastructure must be enhanced. They must have an ambulance in-house and a qualified pediatrician to manage thousands of children. They must also have resuscitation facilities, not just CPR, but resuscitation facilities. But having said that, the entire huge anti-vax campaign was pushing to build a false narrative that vaccines are causing cardiac diseases. That is wrong. There are more than 46 or 47 international published peer-reviewed studies which have shown that vaccines are protective and not harmful to the heart. And the largest study is only in children. Only
Okay.
in children is the largest study has been published in JAMA in 2022-23, in which 1.6 lakh children were analyzed, and there is a direct link of COVID infection to increase the incidence of adverse cardiac events, arrhythmias, heart failures, thromboembolic phenomena, which we call as blood clots, strokes, myocarditis, and pericarditis. It's also
Okay.
important to note here that children at the age of 8 were largely not vaccinated in India. So there is no link of vaccine as far as this particular index case is concerned. Almost 70-80% of the incidence of COVID, especially during that time, was asymptomatic, and children were exposed to it. Children did get infected. So I think we need to keep that in mind. But having said that, there is a host of other reasons. But this is the carrying message that this child
Absolutely.
was having symptoms when she was walking. She was unsteady. Probably she was panting, felt breathless. She
In
felt
fact,
tired.
Dr. Sanjeev Bagay, allow me to just again interrupt you because I'm told I'm told the principal joins us again at this point. And since you're talking about the symptoms, let's just listen from Ms. Sharmishtha Sinha herself. Thank you very much, ma'am, for taking your time out.
Thank you.
Very, very unfortunate incident. Our heart goes out to the school, more so to the family. But can you just very quickly tell us, Ms. Sharmishtha Sinha, how did this unfold?
This unfolded because the child came in the morning by the usual van. And when she took the stairs and ultimately went to the first floor where her class is located, we could see that her steps were unsteady. And ultimately, she could find a chair there in the corridor where she sat. And then, if you have seen the video, she started sliding down. Initially, we took that to be some kind of prank being played. But when the teacher understood that there is something serious with the child, we immediately tried to get hold of the child, made her comfortable, lie down, gave her CPR, and ultimately dialed 108. But without wasting much of time, because seeing her condition, we ultimately had to take her to the nearest hospital, that is Zydus, which took us only 5 to 7 minutes reaching there. Ultimately, she was admitted there in the emergency. And then the doctors came and told us that she has had the first cardiac arrest. They are trying to revive her. That is what they told. And they tried to definitely work on her. But then again, they came and told that there was a second cardiac arrest. And then she was put on ventilator. But ultimately, unfortunately, the little one succumbed. It's extremely tragic. And the worst part is she did not have any such kind of
Absolutely.
history. Yeah, that is the thing.
Ms. Sharmishta, I also want to ask you one thing. I believe the school did try giving her CPR. Could you tell us a little about that?
Yes, yes. Our teachers actually are trained, and we have the apparatus also there in the school.
Okay.
So we tried to revive her, and yes, at one point of time, she opened her eyes. She was trying to gasp. She was trying to breathe in because by then even I had reached. We have our board practicals today, but immediately I rushed there, and then we thought we should not take things in hand because we are not qualified doctors. That is the main reason why we immediately took her to the hospital.
Right. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Sharmishta Sinha, for joining us. Thank you very much for your time. Dr. NN
Thank you.
Khanna, let
Thank
me
you.
take what the principal spoke straight up to you. Dr. NN Khanna, you heard that the school at least had some trained professionals in terms of teachers who were trained in immediate action. They did give her CPR, and there was a point when she seemed to be responsive. Now, my question to you, in instances like this, what must schools do? Or not just schools, anywhere where this can happen.
Okay, so let's first talk about schools. I would definitely agree with the previous speakers, Dr. Bagai, that every school should have a pediatrician or a trained doctor, especially if it is a sizable school. And I'm very happy to know and note that the school had teachers who were trained in CPR and had equipments for CPR. If that should be the base standard for all the schools in the country. And if that is so, we can actually not only, save lives because of cardiac arrest, but we can also, diagnose these sort of disease. It could be, many a times what happens is the child has a viral fever, some sort of a viral myocarditis, and that can lead to this sort of a condition where the patient can suddenly get into heart failure or into electrical short circuiting, which we call ventricular tachycardia or ventricular fibrillation. So my take home, my advice to
Okay.
all the teachers in the schools would be, seeing incidences like this, the school should be geared up with CPR facilities, trained teachers, and also paramedics, and the helping staffs in the school should be knowing when to do CPR and how to do a CPR and how to take the patient straight away to the nearest hospital. And if the most desirable thing is large scale
All right.
schools should have a pediatrician in the campus.
I hope schools are listening, stakeholders are listening to this. Dr. Shikha Sharma, let me get you in at this point. Thank you very much for your patience. We heard the doctors speak, and you also heard about Dr. Sanjeev Bagai saying about there are several factors to this. We did spend a little bit of time on COVID and the possible links about how more children are susceptible and about how literature and science proves this. My question to you, Dr. Shikha, what would you tell parents, schools? Because let's face the facts. Many schools in today's times, particularly schools, whether it be with IB, CBSE or ICSE, the premier schools, they're also, in a way almost giving breakfast, snacks, lunch, and even a post-lunch meal inside the schools. It's compulsory. So it's not like the parents have an option to send tiffins. It's schools who provide the meals. And then you have the options of where parents can send their tiffins as well. So this is literally how it is done. What would you tell parents, schools and caretakers, primary or secondary, when you listen to instances like this?
Yes, very unfortunate incident, and I would, say the same thing what Dr. Bagai has said, that post-COVID, there has been a change and a lot of inflammation in everybody's bodies. And we all know that COVID has been directly linked with rise in inflammation and all inflammation markers you can see in many, many, many people. So the first thing I would say is that it's not the same thing as it used to be 15, 20 years back, that, okay, the child wants to have chocolates, the child wants to have ice cream, the child wants to have chips, packaged chips. No, it is a very different world we are living in with a very different situation which has happened. So the first thing I would say is, so I would say that please ensure, both schools and parents, I would say that your children
Sorry,
are.
I didn't hear you. I think that was not clear. When you said the first thing I would say is, what would you want to repeat yourself at that?
Yes. So the first thing I would say is that we have to remove processed food from the diet of children as of today. It has to be removed because processed food is not about calories. I think most parents and schools get it wrong. We are not talking calories. We are talking chemicals. So let's get out of this understanding that this is low calorie, high calorie. In case of children, we're talking about chemicals in their food. If you pick any processed food and if you turn the label, you will see so many chemicals which are put into the food, and those chemicals are now reacting with that COVID inflammation, post pandemic inflammation, and suddenly is causing disorders. So that is number one. Number two, there has to be on a war footing education to both parents and schools on what is the right kind of food for the children, and what is something which they can have and what they should not have, even, and we should forget about the calorie concept for the time being. Third thing I would say is screening. I think many years back, good schools always had a
Hmm.
screening mechanism. Children annual screening programs used to be there, and those screening programs help to diagnose things which otherwise went undetected. So I would say that those screening programs must start in schools so that we can have some kind of detection, some kind of a red flag if the child we find that the biometric parameters are not up to the mark. So these three things I think are as important as education. So health curriculum in schools, screening programs, and I would say that we have to change the way we think about food. It's not about low calorie, high calorie. It's about real food and about chemical food.
All right, and just one question more, Dr. Shikha, now to parents who say real food takes time. We don't have the time for the urban setup to ensure that tiffins are given out. And in fact, even schools, which take large amounts of money, may not be really giving the right kind of food when it comes to the menu that's decided. It may be more convenience, it may be more something that children may like eating, but it may not be nutrition dense. What would you say to that?
Yes, I think that stems not from intention that they intentionally want to do this. It stems from the fact that they're not aware. They just don't understand the repercussions or the outcomes of this kind of food. So I think if the principals and the teachers and the PTAs are sufficiently made aware of the repercussions of these foods, I'm sure they'll change, because what I have seen is that most good schools, even
Okay.
average, they do care about their children, and I'm sure once they understand the severe outcomes of this food, they will make that change.
Okay. Dr. Sanjeev Bagai, my last question, and I want you to spend a little bit of time on this. Dr. Shikha spoke about screening. Schools must do screenings. What should schools and families do in cases like this for, families that have children on board with them?
Schools are very large institutions which harbor thousands of children. Take any large private school, even in Delhi or any other metro, from just a senior school, from class 5 onwards up to class 12, you would have in excess of 10 to 12,000 children. So I think medical facilities must be authentic, robust, and up to date in the school. A child is spending 8 hours in academics and very often stay back as far as sports is concerned. Sports is also a stress on the body. So I think we need a proper medical infrastructure in place with qualified pediatricians. It will be a very nice and a very small investment to make. They must have a proper ambulance parked in the school, a property of the school, in case of any medical emergencies. Point number three,
Right.
when you are having a screening program, a lot of schools don't have an annual health checkup. If at all the health checkup is done, it's very often done as a eye wash by a local family kind of doctor who doesn't examine the child. I would give three messages. The school must spend time in having an annual health checkup in the premises of the school. A simple heart rate monitoring of a child
Okay.
and a blood pressure documentation of a child picks up early diseases. Point number two, they must have at least once or twice a year a orientation on nutrition and diet in the school for the parents. The carry home message is awareness. If you eat well, you will live longer. You eat nonsense, you will die earlier. Health of a child is going to decide the next 50 years of our own generations in our country.
Right. I think let's just leave it at that. Extremely worrying, extremely shocking visuals, and just repeated instances of this coming in. I think India really needs to look into this very deep and rethink about how children are living in today's India. Mr. Dr. N.N. Khanna, thank you very much for your time. Dr. Sanjeev Bagai, thank you very much for your time. And Dr. Shikha Sharma, thank you very much for your perspective and joining us. Time for a very short break.